Let's talk a little bit about secret societies first, because one thing that a lot of people don't know, secret societies originally were the mystery school. Just like you have good and you have bad. Well, they started out really, really good. And once these quote-unquote gods disappeared, which are really people that have advanced technology and advanced knowledge, spiritual wisdom, once they appeared for us to have disappeared or left us to ourselves, people who were in these schools continued them, but over time they became more evil. Kind of like how you see the Jedi Knights in Star Wars. Okay, you have the Jedi Knight, the Jedi Order, and you have people using the Force for good, and then you have people using the Force for bad. Same exact concept. Where do you think they got it from? A secret society is a society whose membership, proceedings, or teachings are secret, concealed from non-members or otherwise not open to the general public. Secret societies typically accept new members only by initiation rituals, which frequently bind the initiate by various oaths not to reveal the secrets of the society to non-members. The initiations are sometimes multiplied so that there are a variety of degrees or additional credentials that the members can achieve or progress through. These may take the form of an inner circle or a group of adepts or the elect, sharing further secrets that are not communicated to other members. Secret handshakes, passwords, and other symbols are taught to the initiates to enable them to be recognized by other members without giving away the secret. The secrecy aspect of the societies is overrated because the secrets are often known, or at least similar to known, in other secret societies. This is especially true for the many organizations, which are appendant bodies or college fraternities, for example, that are a derivative of Freemasons, whose rights are well documented. College fraternities actually need to have a large degree of non-secrecy because they compete with each other for new members. But secret societies also frequently feature social networking, and the membership in the society acts as a recommendation to members and may cause the members to be preferred over other non-members in employment opportunities and appointed positions. Because of these features, secret societies often figure in conspiracy theories, organized crime associations, such as the Mafia, and sometimes operate as other secret societies, which we well know. So, this is the fundamental basis. It's very important for you to understand that the Egyptian mysteries are, unfortunately, the stem of these secret societies, the same ones that, got John F. Kennedy killed for talking about them and putting it into them. A variety of mystery religions existed in the ancient world, such as the mysteries of Demeter and Eleusis and Mithras and Orpheus. Morpheus, you see where they get this stuff from, guys? Initiates underwent a number of secret rituals to join these cults, swearing terrible oaths to keep the proceedings secret and inviolate, and as well as result in substance of their beliefs, and the nature of their ritual has been almost entirely lost. The gap in knowledge generates a great deal of speculation. And early Christianity, with its initiatory ritual of baptism, resembles these ancient mystery religions in some ways. So let's look at a couple of them. Skull and Bones, you probably heard of these. The founders, Frederick Ellsworth, Phineas Timothy Miller, William Huntington, Taft, Alfonso Taft, George Ingersworth. I mean, all these names, a lot of you guys know about these conspiracies, but these are actually real and well documented. Where was it held? Yale University. Why? The secret society was formed after a dispute between several debating societies at Yale, so they created Skull and Crossbones. But they utilized the information from the Egyptian mysteries. They're feared because members are known as bonesmen, use their bonds of power and influence to make their way up through the ranks of America's elite. So, just like I said before, you can use this information for good or bad. And what they've done is, if you're a part of this inner group, this inner circle, anything that you need and want, business-wise or personally, this group makes it happen by just pressing a couple of buttons. You have the Illuminati. The Illuminati was formed in 1776 by Adam Weishaupt. Now, this is something that people need to know. The Illuminati wasn't here since the very beginning of time. Only the concepts were here since the beginning of time, but they took them and fine-tuned them. So I want you to know, when you see these names up here on this Illuminati list, first of all, the Illuminati is a very small sized group of people, 5 or 6 people at the very, very top of the pyramid. Then you have about another maybe 100 people underneath that. But these people are extremely, extremely elite people that maneuver in ways in the darkness. And they are not people like Jay-Z, Barack Obama, and Beyonce and Dame Dash and myself and all those other kind of. I've been called a clone. I've been called the Illuminati member. Everything else. It's a private club, guys, and like the comedian says, we're not in it. Okay, we're not in that club. It's a good old boys club, and there's not a lot of minorities in it at all. I don't think there's any minorities in it, pretty much. So I wanted to get that out there because just something I felt like, the thing that I hear a lot on TV or some of these videos on YouTube and some of the social media is that, there's cloned rappers and, these people are in the Illuminati and so forth and so on. It's all not true. The people who are in the Illuminati, at the very top of that food chain, you'll probably never meet them. You'll never know who they are. A lot of them are just behind the scenes, hiding in the shadows. And it's not famous people on the front street now. Do they utilize the potential of people that are already in existence that have power over genres of people? Yes, of course. That's what any businessman would do. Freemasons, 1717, founder, 4 English lodges. Now, the Freemasons really date all the way back to the time of Amun-Ra, when he was actually supposedly walking amongst the earth with the people. He mostly ruled from his skyship or the sun disk, according to the Egyptian glyphs and some writings in the Book of the Dead. Amun-Ra very rarely came down to be around people. And Akhenaten used to worship him and call him the Aten, or the sun god. But ironically, he had these people that he had created, genetically modified, I would say, that became the Masons, and they were some of the builders for his kingdom. And these builders were the originators of this Freemasonry, and it was all about building in science, information, technology into stone buildings in a way that harnessed energies and powers, that harnessed frequencies and vibrations that basically were able to allow the person that rules over that building or owns that structure to generate realities that they're looking to pursue or their agenda that they want to occur. They literally discovered that there's a way, these ancient Egyptians, I mean, really not Egyptians, they're really ancient Kemetic people and the people of the ancient Atlantis were the originators of this mindset. The ability to understand that buildings harness information, digital information from the ether of space-time. They also harness frequencies and vibrations that, based on the conscious intent of the building of the structure, can actually create an outcome that you're looking for. In other words, buildings can cast spells, and this is one of the biggest mysteries out there. So, for example, when you look at places like Washington, D.C., and you look at it from the sky view, looking down, and you realize the way that the roads are laid out and the structures are laid out, and then you take that same exact layout and look at Cydonia on Mars from the Mars Curiosity rover or the Mars Global Surveyor missions, you begin to realize that it's basically the same exact layout. What are they trying to say there? Then when you look at some of the other images or other buildings that are built there, you begin to realize that it has a lot of Egyptian architecture to it. And no matter where you go around the world, you begin to see this Egyptian architecture on these public buildings and these courthouses and so forth. And why is that? Well, they discovered that they can hide a lot of information and mysteries into the building structure itself. You have Bohemian Grove. I mean, I can go on and on. I'm just going to go through these. Bilderberg Group, some of you have heard of. These are all based off of the mystery school's teachings. So actual secret societies would be Bohemian Grove, college fraternities, Freemasonry, the Hellfire Club, Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, Knights Templar, Ku Klux Klan, Opus Dei, Order of Sharona, Order of Solar Temple, Organized Crime, Scientology, Skull and Bones, the historical thugs, believe it or not, Triads, Biblical Courts, the Committee of 300, the Great White Brotherhood, the Illuminati, the New World Order, the Occult Claves, Priory of Sion, the Rosicrucians, and the Trilateral Commission. All of those are secret societies.
Let me ask you, what got you into this type of knowledge?
Well, I come from the world of military counterintelligence, and when I was leaving the service back in the year 2002, 2003, I thought to myself, I need to eat, okay, and so I need to do something. And so I thought to myself, I have a lot of knowledge, of a lot of stuff that we know about, which is not really public knowledge, but I could write about it. But it had to be something that made sense. It had to be something that was backed up by a lot of documentation. You couldn't just talk, conspiracies without showing people proof. I mean, that's too easy. And so I thought to myself, we have a lot of stuff on the Bilderbergers. They've been around since 1954. And, again, when we're talking about Bilderberg, it's a real private organization. And if you kind of go back historically and you look at the structure, who they are, where they come from. And so in light of this rise of Atlanticism, which, eventually culminated in NATO's inception back in 1949, a Western transatlantic power elite was in the making after the end of World War II. And so this transnational capitalist class, as some analysts call it, doesn't always obviously answer to a particular nation state, but instead to multinational bankers, corporations, the idea of globalism in general. And so contrary to Lenin's theory of imperialism, which assumes that competing nation states acts as a kind of a behest of nationally based internal capitalist classes, bilateral capitalists, okay, so especially we're talking about the United States and Western Europe, emerged in the wake of World War II. And although this transnational class, it kind of, feeds from the favors of governments on both sides of the Atlantic, it transcends this inter-imperialist rivalries, as Henry Kissinger used to call it. And so Kautsky's, for example, notion of ultra-imperialism provides kind of an alternative theoretical framework, as he postulates that the rival capitalist interests, coalesce into a kind of a relative unified hegemonic bloc. And so the emergence of this transnational power elite reverberated in the proliferation of this globalist-minded think tanks, for example, Council on Foreign Relations in the United States, a Transnational Trilateral Commission, okay, but also in the secretive, not private, not secret, but secretive transatlantic organizations of meetings, of which the Bilderberg Group itself is a characteristic example in the case of European unification. And we talk about Bilderberg, we're not talking about, as a lot of the conspiracy theorists do. When my book came out, okay, they said, so these are the people who control the world. Okay, and now it's all, everything is clear. Now we can go home. Okay, and so it's, it just simplifies the entire operation itself. And the Bilderberg conferences themselves, it's a kind of an annual private invitation-only meeting of about 120 to 150 people of European and North American political elites. It's Canada, the United States, and Western Europe, what used to be known as the former NATO alliance. Okay, and so you have the conjunction of the leaders of the industry and finance, academia, and media. Although it brings together some of the global's most powerful people every year, the group is able to remain, well, at least until my book came out, okay, almost completely secretive and anonymous, with hardly any reports, because obviously the media forms part of the Bilderberg inner circle. And the media, obviously the blackout itself, gives the idea of the Bilderberg is a very powerful organization. And so rather than this totally homogenous group, the Bilderberger meetings are organized around the principle of reaching consensus. Okay, nobody tells anybody what to do. There's no mafia guys are telling you how to do this. No, because they're all powerful people. The royalty is there. Okay, the British royalty, the Dutch royalty, and one of the founders was Prince Bernard, who died obviously many years ago, but he was the consort to the Queen Juliana of the Netherlands. And so the conference itself derives the name, the Bilderberg Conference, from the Hotel de Bilderberg in the Netherlands, okay, where it was first held back in May 1954. And it was organized around the principles of this global supranational political class. Again, Western European, North American elite. Again, the idea was to promote Atlanticism. And eventually the Atlantis idea itself, created or led to, the Treaty of Rome, and led to the creation of the European Union. And all of these meetings, again, we have records of that. Now we can show that it's true, because the first, for example, 5 Bilderberg conferences played a decisive role in the lead up, what became known as the Treaty of Rome, which reorganized, Europe into some kind of a cohesive formal structure as the basis of its foundation. Okay, yeah. So anyway, that's a bit of a history of what Bilderberg is and how it came about. It's not a secret society. Okay, there are no secret societies such as the Bilderberg. It's a very private organization. It's still powerful, not nearly as much as it was back in the 50s and the 60s. But again, it still plays a decisive role in how a lot of these supranational structures interact amongst themselves. The Bilderbergers, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
You made a couple of interesting points there in reference to Atlantis, because, I wrote the book Compendium of the Emerald Tablets. And
right.
In there are the origins of the original mystery schools, where only adept initiates were able to attend. But what you find is, over time, that out of these mystery schools where only adept initiates were there to teach, learn about enlightenment, how to reach the light, how to ascend, how to become an ascended master, and all these incredible things, how to tap into higher levels of consciousness. But also, I believe that much later, these same concepts and precepts from the mystery schools that stemmed out of Atlantis broke off and became these other secret societies or secreted societies or societies that have that are not secret but that have some secrets within them, like Freemasonry and so forth. And they kind of stemmed off from this, and they all kind of really go all the way back to these original mystery schools, which is pretty amazing.
I think you mentioned, I don't remember the name of the book, but I think you also talked about the Ptolemaic cults of the Isis and the Stoic cults. Or am I wrong?
Yeah, correct. Yeah,
Which
absolutely.
were, with the ruling pagan cults of the imperial Rome introduced, to Rome by the priests of Apollo. So when you actually go back to the mystery schools, there is a foundation, needless to say. And so, like, for example, if we talk about the Eye of Horus, form part of the cult of Isis, which was kind of created a synthetic religion under the Ptolemaic conquerors of Egypt. And a lot of these people who attend a lot of these conferences, whether it's the Bilderberg conference or we're talking about the Bohemian Grove, okay, which is a private invitation only conference, which is held in California every September. Okay, a lot of these people are, needless to say, they're followers a lot of these cults. Am I wrong?
Oh, they are, absolutely. And what they realized was that the knowledge, that secreted knowledge, and the concepts of coming together, powerful minds coming together, and on one accord and in agreement of certain things, can literally manifest any reality that they want on this planet at any given time, and for however long they want it to manifest. And so once they understood that it could be used for light or darkness for whatever reason, some of these groups really, unfortunately, kind of chose the dark side. They chose power, dominion, money, capitalistic concepts and ideas to give them the capability of ruling over masses of people for millennia. And it's kind of really worked out for them and worked out in their favor.
The cult of Isis, the priests of the cult of Apollo at Delphi, used the selected names of deities from the Egyptian pantheon to create a cult combining the Babylonian cultism of Apollo with the Orphic and Dionysian cult of Greece. And so you have the Orphic, which is the death cults of Greece. They were centered around the figure of Osiris. And so the Egyptian goddess Isis was given the legendary and also personal properties of the mother of Dionysus, and the Oedipian and Centros mythology around the three combined figures, Osiris, Isis, and Horus, was based on the mythology of the Phrygian cult of Dionysus, or the Roman equivalent, which is the cult of Bacchus. And as you said, you can either choose light or you can choose darkness. And a lot of these individuals, and again, we can talk about the music industry, how the same examples are used over and over again. Like there's a rapper named Prodigy. There's a video clip, I don't know if you saw it, called The Life. There's like a split-second image of the all-seeing eye painted on the wall. And what's it doing there? What does it have to do, with the song itself? It has nothing to do with the song. Or Lady Gaga's Alejandro. I don't know if you saw that video. That's like from a few years back. Yeah, the lead male dancer, she was on stage doing it. I saw one of the show's, gala ceremonies. He had an imprint of a pyramid and an all-seeing eye in the back of his, jeans jacket, while Lady Gaga was, making an all-seeing eye sign with her right hand while bending over, outstretching leg. And people say, just coincidence, you're making too much. Do you think I'm making too much out of this? Oh, we're talking about the secret world of signs and symbols. I mean, you're the expert, Billy, on this.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of secret, they're given these secret symbols and signs that they transmit through music videos, through TV shows, through movies, through news shows. They're everywhere. And they initiate these secret signs and symbols through hand gestures and different types of drawing or artwork that could be on the wall in the background. So subliminal and so ambiguous, you might not even notice it, but you're taking it in. And these are signs that go out to the people that know what they mean. They recognize them right away. They look for them and they recognize them, and they get the meaning of what these symbols represent. And it's a big part of the entertainment industry now.
Which also the big part of counterculture itself, and the counterculture model. That in the end, it was the British that imposed the counterculture model in the United States. Remember the British invasion of the 1960s. Just another phrase, just a coincidence. Coincidences don't exist. And so this counterculture model that the British had imposed on the United States was in fact based on what? On pagan ceremonies of ancient Egyptians and Roman empires. And they, had a history of their own. And so the continuity of going back to the cult of Apollo, which a lot of these members of these secret societies, they're very much into this. Because we're talking about what? We're talking about black nobility families of Rome, whose families and family political traditions trace back to the Roman Republic. And so the Republic and the empire under which their ancestors lived was in turn controlled by the Roman branch of the cult of Apollo. And the cult was during that time, okay, we're talking, one way or another, the chief usurious debt farming institutions of the Mediterranean region. And so again, if you kind of look at some of these families, what are we talking about? Well, for example, who are these black nobility families? The Agnellis. These are the owners of Juventus Football Club, the owners of the Fiat Motor Company. These kinds of families. And they're, needless to say, very, 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 very powerful. Most people don't even understand that they exist. And needless to say, when we're talking about symbols, they have no idea what these symbols stands for. But if you actually don't understand, and again, it's the same thing with secret society, the same thing when we're talking about the world of Masonry, you need to understand the ceremonies, you need to understand the symbols, okay, the signs and symbols of the world beyond, okay, right. Those who can see and those who can't.
Exactly. I think that a lot of people hear the term Freemasonry or see someone that they may think they have a Freemasonry ring on or a symbol or something that they see in their background. And then they, especially in this community, oh, that person's got to be evil because they have a compass behind them, or you know what I mean. And it's like these preconceptions. I think that all people that understand or know about Freemasonry are in some way trying to dominate and take over the planet. I studied this stuff myself without going to any lodges or any official invites to any secret meetings. But you can get these books on eBay and Amazon and learn I want to know, what are these people studying? What are they learning about? What are they being told? Because I want to know, and I want to know, what are these symbols and the structure, the sacred geometry built into these structures and buildings, like all throughout Washington, D.C. and all around the world, throughout Rome and everywhere else. I want to, and of course, going all the way back to ancient Egypt, I want to be able to understand them so I can know for myself what in the world is going on. And so from your personal experience, have you seen that Freemasonry has nothing to do with good or evil? It has to do with the person that wields the knowledge.
It's a very interesting topic, Billy, because again, from a conceptual point of view, I have a doctorate degree in political science, and my specialty is creating models that explain the future conceptually at a much, much higher level. I think it's important to understand, because again, it's a really good question. It's like, so is a Mason, is it bad or is it good? Again, if you actually analyze, where do these people come from? What is their role, and what part did they play? Okay, in the grand scheme of things, of especially this conspiratorial system globally. Okay, so in whatever country, okay, it lived, doesn't matter, large country, small country, the financial sector always has interests that go beyond national borders. That's easy to tell. You have transnational corporations that may have their office in the United States, but they have smaller offices all over the world. McDonald's, for example. And so these interests can be realized only by violating the laws of another country. And so you need, going back in time, you need an organizational weapon that would that somehow formalize the interests of the capitalist elite of various states. In other words, remove the contradictions with the state and become the expression of their supranational and long-term interests. That's first of all. Second of all, so these organizations should be, if not completely secret, then close to the general public. For example, like the Bilderbergers. And thirdly, these organizations or these structures should be able to influence countries and nations, influence their leaders, and those leaders being simultaneously above the state and over the capital, the money. And so a lot of these people, for example, who belong to the Bilderbergers, okay, their loyalty is not to the nation state. Their loyalty is to the transnational interests. We know how that works. I don't think I need to explain it to your audience. And so what these structures are engaged in cannot be called anything other than the permanent institutionalized conspiracy. Now, it's not a bad thing, okay? When we talk about conspiracies, we're talking about, something that on the need-to-know basis. Even a football team meeting, for a final practice before Super Bowl, Okay, they have their system, they have their objective, they have their way of that they're going to play the game, and they're not going to share that with anybody else. And we can extend that same principle to the G7 meeting, ministers meeting, European Union meeting. Doesn't matter what meetings they are; they're all secret and private. And so, therefore, we should talk about the conspiracy system. And so we talk about capitalist systems. They include all types of closed supranational structures, Masonic lodges, gentlemen's clubs, something that proliferates so much in England, secret societies, etc., etc. When we talk about secret societies, we could talk about Skull and Bones, which are the descendants of the famous Illuminati. And so conspiracy system in no case are exhausted by Freemasonry or quasi-Masonry, but in the 18th and then significant part of the 19th centuries, they were the dominant organizational form of the capitalist system. But since the end of the 19th century, and especially into the 20th century, you had new modern forms of these organizational structures arose, because in the 17th and 18th centuries, you had the church. That was the only transnational institution. There was nothing else. And so they created these Masonic lodges, the brotherhood, okay, that basically worked together on the supranational level. But then, especially in the 20th century, you had the Bilderberg, the Trilateral Commission, the other structures as well were created the world over. Some British, some American, some European. Le Cercle, which was a creation of the French intellectuals and French members of parliament. And so the conspiracy system is the third corner of the capitalism as a system, as it occupies, let's say the tip of the triangle. You have the capital, you have the state, and the conspiracy system. And so the conspiracy system removes not only the underlying political and economic contradictions, but also others between various forms of capital and accordingly fractions of the capital class between nations. And so capitalism, because again, it's not only capital, because capital existed long before capitalism, it's going to exist long after capitalism is dead. But capitalism is a very complex social system with institutions, state, politics, civil society, mass education, manipulates capital in its long-term and also holistic interest, and thus extends its own life into the future and provides expansion, space. And so you build and keep building and building and expanding until there is nowhere else to expand. And so finally, there's another, again, essential, I'm going to finish, contradiction of this bourgeois society, which the conspiracy system is called upon to remove. Because in a capitalist society, official power is not sacred. Secrecy is not its inherent characteristic, I want to say. Because, for example, in the pre-capitalist societies, whether we're talking about Asia or Africa or pre-Columbian America, this secret was an inherent characteristic of power, but this secret was in plain sight. People knew about secret power and the secret of power. Power itself was perceived in many ways as something mysterious and sacred. And so the conspiracy system itself removes the fundamental contradictions of capitalism, and this is their function. But it also said that the capitalist class did not have ready-made structures for fulfilling their functions. In other words, how do you expand if you have no one on the other end to actually be able to take on that expansion and move it forward? And so they adapted the existing structures, especially, again, because at those times, 17th century, 18th, what did you have? You had the churches. And that's where the Masonic structures come in, which serves the interest not so much of the bourgeois as other groups, or be related to the functional world markets. And so the old structures acquired new content that modified them. In other words, old keys began to unlock new locks. And at the same time, this content was already heavily influenced by the past, especially since the group that organized these structures were largely included in this new capitalist class, mainly, specifically, I'm referring to the British. And so that's, again, to demystify this whole thing about the Masonic structures, thinking that they're evil, that they're, yes, they could very well be, but the initial idea where they came from, okay, it's the practicality of how do you create a supranational structures that do not answer to the class within a country itself, which is what we have right now.
Yeah, absolutely. This can be tracked. What you just said is perfect, because it can be tracked all the way back to pre-dynastic Egypt. There was this group of people called the Shetu. This is according to the ancient Egyptians. The Shetu worked under the rulership of Amen-Ra, also known as Marduk in the modern day Bible. He's known as Marduk in the Sumerian tablets also, as a matter of fact. But these Shetu were brick masons, and they were in charge of the architectural, masterpieces that you can see. They were like the master architects in some of these ancient temples and structures. They knew the locations to build them because of the magnetic field that was there, the energy centers that were there. They knew how to build structures to harness energy from the ether. They knew how to hide secreted information into the construction of the buildings themselves, to where only a person who can see, who has the eye to see, will be able to identify those
Right.
secret messages and information. And so that passed on, into the future, and it just kept going and going and going. You can even see in the modern Catholic Church, even in the 1800s and the 1700 Catholic Church, you see the triptych design, where you see the three windows at the front of the church, which are identical to the three temple windows that you see carved out at the very top of a lot of pyramids in Mesoamerica and so forth. So a lot of this triptych design made it from Masonry into, the Catholic Church system, and you just see this progression over time of these hidden structures, or hidden knowledge inside of these structures, that can be dated back and linked all the way back to ancient texts and tablets and papyruses and cylinder scrolls and so forth. So this is something that's been around for a very long time. However, when you look into the modern,
Years ago, or we're talking older?
6,000 years. And then when you look into the modern, the day and modern era right now with Mason, Freemasonry, you look at some of these lodges, it's really just a place for guys to get together, hang out, have some drinks, talk some gossip, in most cases, sometimes have some parties. There's really not a lot of real knowledge going on. They're not having the influence. The ones that you see in these local corners throughout specific neighborhoods, there's not a lot of influence there. It's just more like a social club.
Well, it depends also on the level, because again, those who enter the Masonic lodges or the Brotherhood, they think that from the first from the get go they're gonna have access to all these secrets. That's not really how it works. You got to get to a certain level, at least the 30th degree Freemasonry, and that's when you really begin to enter into the world of signs and symbols. For example, if you ask people, and I think it's one of the things that if I were a minister of education in an ideal country where I could design the curriculum of the kids, I'd make them literal. I'd offer them the symbolic, the literacy in the world of signs and symbols. Like, for example, when we're talking about the entertainment industry, okay, whether it's Rihanna, or it doesn't matter who it is, okay, most people understand when we're talking about the eye of the providence as the all-seeing eye, the symbol of Illuminati, as people say, one world government. But it's also the symbol of the supreme being. It's also a symbol of the great architect of the universe, because it appears on every US $1 bill. I know there are a lot of people that don't even look at the dollar bill. Have a look at the dollar bill, ladies and gentlemen. Above, the topless pyramid, a Masonic symbol for the unfinished Temple of Solomon. And there's a lot more sinister interpretation. For example, in ancient mysteries, and again, one of the reasons I love what you do is because there's so much stuff out there. Okay, we all have specialty things that we do well, but there's just so much to investigate. And all these things, if I want to understand how these societies lived and functioned 6,000 years ago, I turn to Billy Carson. Okay, but again, it's like if you look at the ancient mysteries, the aspirant going way back, could not claim, for example, the participation in the highest secrets of the Masonic orders until he had been placed in what's called the pastos, which is a bed or coffin. And placing him in the coffin was called the symbolical death of the mysteries, and his deliverance was termed a rising from the dead. Okay, the mind, okay, says the ancient writer quoted by Stobart, is afflicted in death just as it is in initiations in the mysteries. And word answered to word, as well as things to think, for burial to die, the death to be initiated. And so the coffin in Masonry is found on the, for example, tracing boards of the early part of the last century, and has always constituted a part of the symbolism of the third degree. That's the third, and then we're going to the the 6th, the 9th, the 12th, 15th, 18th, etc., until we get to the 30th. For example, the whole idea we're talking about the symbolism itself, the importance of ladders, okay, and in any kind of because again we're talking about ladders, we're talking about steps, okay, and if you look historically, there are all kinds of ladders, and I even talked about the Brahmanical ladder, which is 7 steps, the Kadosh ladder, which is also 7 steps, the Russian Christian ladder, 7 steps, Jacob's ladder, okay, the Kabbalistic ladder, which is 10 steps. Then there's the old, what you call Tim Finnegan's ladder, is known sometimes as ladder of the misfortune. And these kinds of things, again, to most people, they don't understand. It's just, he died on, 22nd of November. No, he did not. He was ritualistically murdered on 11/22, and he who kills the king becomes the king.
Yeah, they really believe in that stuff. So the people who are at the highest level who really understand the Masonry and have some of these, quote unquote, secret societies that take it serious, not the ones that are just utilizing it for social gatherings.
Right.
They understand the true, real power in it. They understand the frequencies. They understand the numerology that's involved. They know how to manipulate space-time continuums. They know how to create future realities by creating ripples now and watching those ripples play out to the end. And they know how to time it all by dates and times. They know all the synchronicities that need to happen ritualistically to make it unfold. Because I want to show the good and the bad. I like to show people both sides. I want to show people the power that's there and how people access it and make a decision to access this power to use it for darkness. There's a choice in this world. There's always a fork in the road. You can go this way or you can go this way. The force is always going to be the force. The force exists everywhere. It's up to the person how they decide to use it. A person can have a gun and a person can have a car. The person with the gun can use it to protect somebody. The person with the car can use it to run over people walking down the sidewalk randomly. You know what I mean? And so it's important for people to understand that we all, no matter what it is, we all have a decision. And once we understand and once we gain the knowledge, which can become the power if we apply it correctly, we can utilize it for light or we can utilize it for darkness, which is pretty powerful.
Absolutely. Yeah. I totally agree with you.
So, obviously you have the Trilateral Commission, which is a pretty interesting organization. Can you touch on that a little bit for the people that may not know?
Yeah. So when we're talking about the Trilateral Commission, which is, again, we have 3 main, let's say, conspiratorial structures. The Bilderbergers, which is founded back in 1954, which is the former NATO alliance, Canada, the United States, and Western Europe. That's about 120, 130, 140 members who come annually to this conference. Okay. Then you have the Council on Foreign Relations, which is the American version, American brother organization to the Bilderbergers. That was created back in the 1920s. And it's the continuation of Cecil Rhodes's Roundtable back in England. And so you have a lot of these different branches of Council on Foreign Relations. And that's a strictly American organization with about 3,500 members. Okay, they're, again, all Americans in all different branches, politics and industry and culture, and then, the media, et cetera, et cetera. And then you have the Trilateral Commission, which was created back in 1973 by David Rockefeller and Zbigniew Brzezinski and also Jimmy Carter. And the idea is you have the Americans, Europe, and Asia. Thus, it's called Trilateral Commission. That's about how many members? It's about 350 members. So Bilderberg is the more exclusive of the 3. Okay, the Trilateral Commission is somewhere in the middle. They've been around again since 1973, and the Council on Foreign Relations. And so when you kind of look at all of these globally together, and a lot of the members, like, for example, the Rockefellers or the Rothschilds, their members, like the Rockefeller at one time was the president of the Trilateral Commission. He was one of the founders of the Bilderbergers, and needless to say, he was one of the chairmen of the CFR. The same could be said for people like Zbigniew Brzezinski or Henry Kissinger, or a lot of these other, the heavyweights in the world of politics. And so, again, you have the Trilateral Commission, you have the Americas with a center in Pratt House in New York, you have European Trilateral Commission, that's in France, and you have the Asian Trilateral Commission, that's in Japan. That's the headquarters in Japan. And so they meet many times a year, 3, 4, 5, 6 times a year. They have their own magazines. And people are saying, well, they can't be secret society because they're on magazines, they publish things, they even have a webpage. Yes, they do, but the heavy stuff, as you and I understand, it's never out there. That's the conspiracy stuff. And so in the world, if, just to summarize, so in the world of international finance, because this is what it is, there are those who, how would I say it, steer the events and those who react to the events. And while those who react to the events, they're better known, they're greater in numbers, you see them on the cover of magazines, they give interviews and stuff, etc. Okay, and they seem more powerful. The true power rests with the former. Okay, and the center of this global financial conspiracy, this oligarchy represented by these interlocked groups like the Bilderbergers, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations. And so again, these are very dynamic organizations in the sense that they change, with the time. They absorb and they create new parts while excreting literally remains of the decaying parts. Members of these societies, they come and go, but the system itself, and that's what's important, Billy. The system itself hasn't changed because it's a kind of a self-perpetuating system. Maybe you could say a virtual spider web of interlocked financial and political and economic and industry interests with the Venetian ultra-mundane Fondi model at the center. Fondi of funds. So it's not like one person has all the money. You have a family. You're the Italian mafia, the Rockefellers. The Rockefellers are David Rockefeller. It's the entire family. It's all the monies that they have as a family, all the things that they own globally, all the control mechanism, okay, of the entire family. That's the Fondi model. That goes back to the old Venice. And again, it's very important to understand Bilderberg, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations. Please don't say they're a secret society. They're not a secret society. If they were a secret society, Billy and I wouldn't be talking about it. I wouldn't have sold all these books. I wouldn't have even written a book about them. If you want to talk about secret society, you can talk about Skull and Bones. That's the continuation of the famous Illuminati. No one knew in America that Skull and Bones existed until 1980. Okay? So for almost 200 years, nobody knew that these people existed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and it's not kind of an evil, all-seeing eye of Jewish Masonic conspiracy. There's no conspiracy here, even though a lot of people, well, they're infantile fantasies because they simplify things. People bring things to the lowest common denominator. Again, it's important to understand that no group of people, I don't care how powerful they are, sit around a round table in a dark room, holding hands, staring at a crystal ball, planning the world's domination. They do that in James Bond movies. Okay, well, the real bad guy is really bad. So Bilderberg, again, is not, or Trilateral Commission. It's not a Cartesian fantasy world in which the isolated intentions of some individuals, instead of the dynamics of social processes, shape the course of history as a kind of a movement of evolving ideas and themes over successive generations. And that's the power of these people. You and I, we plan things like, I think you probably plan things way in advance because you're visionary. I plan things from here to the weekend. Most people, that's what we do. What am I going to do this Saturday? Some plan, 6 months down the line, my daughter is getting married. But these people plan things hundreds of years in advance. We just mentioned, the old civilizations going back 5,000, 6,000 years. So a lot of this stuff we're seeing today goes back to that period of time, doesn't it?
I was just about to say that before you brought it up. The fact that, if you look at the ancient Sumerian tablets, you discover that these beings, they call themselves the ordainers of destiny. And they would plan for eons, not just for, like you say, next week or next month or next year, or like most entrepreneurs, a 1 year, 3 year, 5 year plan. No, they would plan for eons of time. And they would look and begin to process the potential future outcomes of what they wanted to happen. They would isolate one specific outcome, and then they would make a plan and put action behind that plan to make that outcome unfold and manifest. And they had plans for eons, not months, years, eons, thousands of years. I remember this one tablet where Enlil was talking to his sister Ninma, and he was showing her this crystal tablet. Is what it said in the text. And on this crystal tablet was his plans to lay out several cities and how the structure of these cities, with the grid style, the city center, the plumbing and the water systems and everything else. He said this is going to be the design and layout for building cities for all time on this planet. He didn't plan it for this will last for a couple decades or a few hundred years. He said, I'm making these plans for all time. And so we can learn a lot from what these people are doing. What they're doing is they're colluding together with their power and influence and coming up with ideas and concepts and making decisions that ultimately have a huge influence on everyone in the entire world, all 8 billion of us. And I think that instead of us always sitting back complaining about what they're doing, why don't we come up with our own solutions? Why don't we come up with our own meetings that we can drop all this divide and conquer and work together and come up with our own plans and work together to create our own futures? And I think that the biggest problem that we have, and we meaning the 8 billion people that are out in the dark, separated and divided and arguing with each other. I think our biggest problem is the fact that we can't see that we are all one and we need to work together. And we have, 100 families or so basically making most of the decisions on which way the planet's going to go. And we just succumb to it. Instead of complaining about it, we got to look in the mirror and say, look, it's our fault that we're in this particular situation. We ourselves need to stop playing the game, come together, work together, and build a future that we want to see unfold on the planet. And until I think people get that mindset of taking action for themselves and their families and connecting and collaborating with people versus isolating themselves and sitting back and whining and crying, we're probably not going to get that far until we can drop that mindset and move forward with a whole new type of way of thinking.
I think also, I totally agree with you, but I think the reason we can't seem to, get our heads around that is because most people think this is a crazy conspiracy theory. They don't just, simply, they can't fathom that this is real. But if you go back a little bit, we don't have to go back that far back. I mentioned earlier the Venetian black nobility. And again, how many people understand the role of Venice in the history of Europe? If you kind of look at the Venetian aristocracy, well, we're talking about a aristocracy that gave 17 papal families, including the Borgias and the Orsinis. We're talking about, their relations to the Medici, to the Sforzas, to the Bourbons of France, the House of Savoy, the Bavarian Wittelsbachs, then you're talking about the Venetian Jewish families, for example, Amorpurgos. These are the people who funded Napoleon. Warburgs, we know who they are in the history of the United States. These are the people who founded Napoleon and also funded Hitler. American Cabots, which is the Jewish Cabotti family from Lombardia, who moved to Venice in the 10th century. So the Cabots, the American Cabots, one of the wealthiest families in the history of the United States. Everybody talks about the Rockefellers. The wealthiest families, they're invisible. Nobody knows who they are.
Nobody.
They're not on Google. If you're on Google, you're nobody.
They're not in Forbes magazine.
You're a zero. If you're in Forbes, you're a zero. Okay? Don't even make it on that list. Because the wealthiest families are not on any list. They're invisible. And so the Cabots, the Cabottis, this is the Italian Venetian family going back 10th century. They're over 1,000 years old. Again, we can mention the Agnellis, the owner of Fiat, over the members of the Venetian black nobility, the owners of Juventus Football Club. People don't understand that. So if you kind of start looking at the structure itself, okay, and in this sense, England played a very important role as a kind of organizational, capability of directing the course of history. And especially England, when I'm talking about England, the nation state, but the English Freemasonry, which relied on the one hand on the financial power of the city, London. London is one thing, city is another. City is a square mile of the most powerful financial interests in the world. Okay, for example, the Queen of England or the King of England cannot go in to the city without being, escorted by the Mayor General of the city. That's how powerful city is. We're talking the power of global market operators, the aristocratic clubs, and of course, the state of Great Britain. And so when you actually look at, how a lot of these structures intertwine, you kind of go to the end of the 18th century, and the Masons were joined by whom? By the Illuminati, created by the Jesuits to fight whom? Freemasonry, but who got out of control. And so the Masons themselves received the operational base that they had worked out and artificially created polygon historical America, the United States, nation states, to where the Illuminati transported themselves and to this day still reap the benefits, okay, from the U.S. system via what? Yale, Skull and Bones, whose members Bush and Kerry represented Republican and Democratic Party during the 2004 presidential elections. You want to talk about exclusivity? 15 members per year. Okay, and 2 of them just happen to be fighting for the presidency of the United States, and they don't want to call it a conspiracy.
I know, it's powerful stuff. It was amazing when I found out that Kerry and Bush were both part of Skull and Crossbones. That's amazing.
Yeah. And so again, if you go back in history, and that's one of the reasons I love watching your stuff, because again, I go back to about 5th, 6th century. which is about 1,500 years in my work. You take all the stuff going back about 4,000 or 5,000 years, and you bring it into the period that I understand that I've been working with for about 20 years. And then suddenly I have a direct line from about 5,000 years ago into the present. And that makes a lot of sense, which is, again, one of the reasons when I said at the beginning, I've been following your work for many years. It's not because I'm saying it because I'm on your show, because I need to follow your work, because I don't know anyone else who does what you do, to understand how we got where we are today. Okay, so we got to go way back. I go back 1,500 years to about the 5th or the 6th centuries. For example, the Baruch family. Everybody talks about the Rothschilds. But there's another family called the Baruchs. They've been around since the 5th century. And they're the owners of Standard Chartered Bank. And that's just happened to be a far more powerful banking institution than the HSBC, the Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation, which is owned by the Rothschilds. Because they've been around for about, what, 300 and a little bit years? And these people have been around for 1,500 years. And so, again, when we start putting all this stuff together, and I think this is one of the ways to do this, is we get all the people who understand things, we start talking to each other. And that's what the elite have been trying to do. They try to break us up, separate, divide. When you divide, you're working, you're doing the job of the devil. Instead of forging forces, working together, okay, they divide us. And so, when I found you, I said to myself, this is the guy who knows his stuff. And so you took me from 5,000 years ago to 1,500, and then I took it from there. And a lot of the things, they started making sense. Like, for example, the Venetians. Well, they financed the Third Crusade. In other words, the deconstruction of Constantinople, and also in part the Reformation. And then the Venetian Bardi family, the Peruzzi family in the 14th century, they funded the English kings, they funded the Fuggers, Fuggrs, okay? In the 16th century, they funded Charles V. And so the union of bankers and the moneylenders of Lombardy, closely connected by this Jewish religious kinship, tied with the bankers of England and the Czech Republic, Prague, which is why Prague is such a symbolic element, especially if we're talking about the Knight Templars. And then you go back like 3,000 years, you're talking about the pharaohs of Egypt. And you ask yourself, well, how is it that, the descendants of these people, where are they now? Well, they're in Switzerland. That's one of the reasons why Switzerland is untouchable for anybody out there. It's the feud of the elite.
Yeah.
There's just so much.
You hit it on the head. You hit it on the head, man. I try to tell people that the migration out of Egypt all the way into Europe, it happened. People were like, I'm telling you, this is the process. This is the trail goes all the way back to the Sumerian kings list prior to a massive flood. We're talking about beings that ruled according to this tablet for 15,000 years, 7,800 years, 8,000, 24,000 years each. And then the great flood came, and then they transferred their power over to these pharaohs, which were their offspring, basically. And the pharaoh will be the liaison between them and the masses. But Egypt had been overthrown 7 different times. This is what people don't understand. It's been overthrown, had been overthrown so many times. The most recent story, the most, I guess, magnificent Hollywood story is Alexander the Great, right? He took over Egypt as well. And he even has a whole city named Alexandria, But these people migrated out of there and went up. They ended up in Europe. And they ended up exactly where you said they were, So I'm glad you said that, because now people don't have to keep hearing it come from my mouth. You know what I'm saying? Because sometimes you read the comments and they're like, what?
What you just said, you did I'm not sure if it was a conference or you did a class or master class on it. So when I saw that, I said to myself, this guy's for real, because he really knows his stuff. Okay, because there's a lot of stuff out there, and you kind of ask yourself, is this a honeypot? In other words, somebody was like leading you on, so you're wasting your time. In the end, takes you in the wrong direction. But when I saw you explain that, I said to myself, no, this guy's for real. Okay, and so it makes a lot of sense. Again, you take the stuff way back to about to the beginning of our era, and I take it into the present, and then so suddenly a lot of the stuff makes sense. You're looking at the parallel timelines, okay, and you say to yourself, well, it's like, how did we get here? Well, there's a guy, Billy Carson, who actually knows how we got here.
So, like I was talking about earlier, the force. What is this force? I don't know if some of you have seen the post that I made maybe several times over the last few years on Forbidden Knowledge and on my other accounts about Yoda, and he's there with Luke Skywalker. It was a young Luke Skywalker, Star Wars episode, and he walks up to Skywalker and he pinches his shoulder and says, "This body is just crude matter," you know, and he's talking about the powers inside of you. You're trying to rely on the physical body to accomplish goals in the physical world. In order to accomplish things in the physical world, you have to go to inner space, and you have to realize that you're more than just this physical body, because the physical body has limitations, but your spirit being has no limitations. And that was the point that he was trying to get across. What happened was one of the ships had crashed into a bog on a planet somewhere, and they climbed out, but they couldn't get the ship out of the water. And so he tells Luke Skywalker to use the Force to get this ship out of the water, and Skywalker wasn't able to do it because he was thinking about physicality. And then Yoda tells him it's not about physicality, it's about your inner self. You have to use the Force. You have to see the connection between you, the ship, the land, space. Everything is connected. When you understand that we're on a power grid, we all are living on a grid, and there is no separation. Separation is an illusion. We're all directly connected on this power grid right now. And me standing up here talking to you guys is actually me up here talking to myself. And vice versa. When you're talking to somebody, you're only talking to yourself. There's only one consciousness. There's only one life force, only one energy, only one divine source of energy. What happens, it has divided itself into trillions of entities to experience itself subjectively from different perspectives and points of view. And when you realize this, then you begin to realize when you're talking to somebody, either you're talking to yourself, now you might be able to operate in unconditional love. This is in the ancient Egyptian teachings. Because what happens is when you're dealing with somebody in a very negative way, in a very hurtful way, you're now hurting another aspect of your own self. So this is one of the famous sayings: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's the actual true saying. It sounds like a very simple lesson to learn, but it's a very difficult lesson. It's a very difficult thing to actually utilize in your everyday life, because people will find ways to trigger you, various different ways to trigger you, or by purpose, sometimes even on accident. And you can trigger a response from somebody every now and then. But when you understand that the energy inside of you is that life force energy, and you have the choice every single time, and every choice has a consequence. This is something else that we have to understand. Every single choice you make has a consequence. Now, it could be a good consequence or a bad consequence, okay? So this morning, you made the choice to get up, get dressed, and come to mystery school. This is your consequence is going to be you're going to gain some information that hopefully you can utilize in your life and maybe share with somebody. If you woke up this morning and said, forget it, I'm not going to go, then the consequence would have been that maybe you didn't come, and maybe you didn't get some valuable information that could have helped change the future of your life, your kid's life, or somebody else's life. So it doesn't have to always be a bad thing, but every choice you make will have a consequence, period. That's just the way it is. Let's look at the Osirian initiation. The great work of the ancient mysteries, and hence the philosophic initiation, was and still is for the seeker to prove himself the truth of these teachings. In the analysis of the Egyptian mysteries, by the light of our arcane knowledge, we find that the cornerstone of knowledge, which is actually a wisdom gained through initiation, had its foundation in the certainty that the first great cause for existence itself was spirit. That the first only element was the soul, and this soul existed eternally and filled infinity. By the power of its own will, the soul divided itself into emanations, or many separate individuals or souls, and being from God or part of God, its own inherent capacity for creation, the unresting or eternally restless element of force, was evolved. Following this came matter, which moving on the oceans of chaos created form and enveloped and evolved or established order. Hence it is said that with the truth, and those seeking to attain the ultimate should remember this saying in all its applications, that order is heaven's first law, because confusion or chaos always follows disobedience. He who refuses to obey this law will be destroyed. In order of creation, the fiery particles of matter ascended. It was written that heaven is above, to form the luminous bodies. The heavier bodies descended, ultimately separated into earth, seas, plants, animals, and finally into entities which became men. This earth plane is what we know as hell, or temporal, not temporary, but temporal, the ever-changing and constantly suffering plane of existence. It is the below into which souls fall to gain wisdom and understanding by experiencing both joy and suffering from the eternal or cosmic soul. The soul preceded successive emanations of the spiritual third density beings, more or less elevated according to their particular status of ascent or descent in the grand scale of the spiritual 3D kingdom. And what this basically means is we are all part of this spirit world that I was telling you about before, or this one consciousness, this divine energy that exists outside this universe, not in the universe, but outside this universe. And basically, when you hear about these fallen angels, this is literally something that was copied over from ancient Osirian initiation, which this is actually a true initiation here, scripture. It was copied over into more modern texts like the modern day Bible and many others, to be that angels fell from heaven and because they were kicked out and so forth. It's actually not true. What really happened was the fallen angels are really the divine energy, the universal consciousness that decided to divide itself into multiple entities and come down and take the form of bodies. And that's what Thoth talks about as well in the Animal Tablets. He talks about advanced beings from other dimensions seeking to experience the third dimension and take and basically collect information. What we are here for is a data collection mission. The deeper I get into these ancient Egyptian mysteries, the more I discover that we're literally on a mission of data collection. And so if we get a little scientific about it now, let's just talk about biology and also as above, so below, which is a little bit of a Hermetic principle. But if you look at, I'm going to tell you how the divine energy of the universe operates. So look at it on a smaller scale. Look at your own body. You have a brain. Some of you maybe heard me say this. You have a brain encased in darkness. Your brain literally has no clue what's going on the outside. Nothing. It knows nothing. It's just encased in darkness, connected to a stem, and it's got some nerves connected to it. It knows nothing. How does the brain get information? Your brain has friends. Hearing, sight, smelling, touch, all your senses, right? So your brain says to its friends, hey guys, do me a favor. Go out there and collect information. Collect me digital bits of data that I can analyze. So the friends go, okay. Now the friends go out, hearing, sight, smell, touch. They go out and they actually what? They collect information. But the friends, they literally cannot decipher the information for themselves. They have no clue what they've collected. No clue. They just say, let me grab this data. I got the data. Let me bring it back to my friend. They go back to the brain and go, here, boom. Here's the data you asked for. The brain takes that information, sorts it all out, and then projects a hologram of what's going on out here. And you navigate through the third dimensional holographic matrix based on that holographic projection. And this is how you navigate through the third dimension. You know, so we are really emanating from another source. The brain doesn't create consciousness, it downloads it. The brain doesn't create consciousness, it downloads it. So, and what does that really mean? Well, some scientists did an experiment where they took people and put them in a room. Now, this experiment was an accidental result. They were looking to see if they put a cap on your brain with sensors to see what would happen if your brain was looking at a picture of an ocean or a bed of roses. What would that look like on a computer screen? What would it look like if you were looking at somebody in distress? What does that look like from the brain? Look, so they would connect you to a computer and they would put these images up 10 seconds apart. They did this to dozens of people. So what started happening is they would show a picture of a rose, a picture of an ocean, a picture of somebody getting murdered. Then it would go back to something serene again, something kind of emotional. And they were getting these readouts. After about 2 minutes, the brain started projecting to the computer what the next image was going to be before the image even showed up on the screen. Up to 7 seconds in advance. Think about that. So up to 7 seconds in advance, the brain is already getting information as to what's happening in the future. Or is it really the future? One of the biggest things in Egyptian mysteries is that we're not living in current time. We're not living in real time. We're actually living slightly in the past. Things are happening ahead of us right now, currently, as I'm standing up here talking to you guys, that are going to happen within the next 7 seconds. Your brain is literally downloading. And where's the source coming from? Most likely, we're getting information directly from the divine source itself, this universal consciousness, this divine energy, this energy that emanates throughout the entire universe that we're calling dark energy and dark matter. Well, we're only calling them dark because we can't see them with our visual perception. We have a very short range of visual perception as human beings. But everything in the third dimension is made of light. It's nothing here but electromagnetic waves. If you take an electromagnetic wave and you slow down the frequency and add a conscious viewer to it, you then get particles of matter. This has been scientifically proven. This is quantum physics, quantum mechanics. It's called the double slit experiment. The ancients have been talking about this for eons. We're just now catching up by doing modern experiments. So if you take a box and put 2 microscopic slits in it, and you put a photon shooter in the back of that box, or particle shooter, and shoot 1 particle at a time towards these 2 slits, what happens is when it goes through the slit, without you looking, on the back wall, it will create an interference pattern, which shouldn't happen. Because if you're shooting an individual particle, how can it create an interference pattern? That means it went through both slits at the same time. This is the quantum world. Okay? Now, if you put a camera to observe the particle going through the slits to see what the heck is happening, all of a sudden, it only goes through 1 slit and create a digital pattern on the back wall. Okay? So this is called the double slit experiment, but this is based off of ancient knowledge, something that the ancients knew eons and eons ago, that we're living in what they call a dream world. Okay? And that when you die is when you really wake up. Okay? When this avatar body ceases to exist and function, its energy, these atoms are recycled back into this 3rd dimensional system, but you release your spiritual essence. And that spiritual essence is right now just temporally means in time, temporally encased in this avatar prison. But through learning the deep Egyptian mysteries and learning the information of Thoth the Atlantean, you have the capability of realizing that you can actually leave and exit this temporarily. You can exit this avatar body, and you can do something called astral travel. You can also do something that I practice, which is called remote viewing. And remote viewing is powerful. In astral travel, you send your spirit body out of your body. Okay, this has been actually kind of really documented. They can actually see a weight difference when somebody astral travels. A few grams disappears from the total body mass. And then when they come back, the grams reappear again. Right? This has been done many times over in science labs. They're still trying to figure out. It's mind-boggling to them. And Thoth talks about the fact that he was able to astral travel and go to other planets and watch civilizations rise and fall. So he's outside of space, outside of time. Once you enter a higher dimension, other than the 3rd, once you go higher than the 3rd dimension, the past, present, and future all happen at the same time. Okay? They all happen at once. It's almost like we're in this building, and imagine that I'm in this room, but I'm also doing something different in that room, and I'm also doing something different in that room, but I'm in the same building. And I'm doing these things all simultaneously. This is really what we're actually doing right now. All possibilities are all happening concurrently, all at once. Okay? So it's a real powerful thing, a real powerful concept to try to grasp and understand. But this is part of the initiation to the Osirian initiation, and understanding that Osiris is actually representing the Orion star cluster, which is where a lot of these beings came from. This is Osiris. Now, no matter where you go, you're going to find out that Osiris is a green person, a green hominid, a person that looks like us, walks like us, talks like us, obviously has a lot more knowledge than us, a lot more wisdom and understanding, but he's always green. And we're going to go a little bit about why he's green. I think that he was also green in color, in natural color, but also, and because he was green in color and one of the first people to create this Osirian initiation, everything else from there became green, like the emerald tablets. The meaning of green in ancient Egypt. The word waj, green, also means to flourish, to be healthy. The hieroglyph represented the papyrus plant, which as well was the green stone malachite. The color green represented vegetation, new life, and fertility. In an interesting parallel with modern terminology, actions which preserved the fertility of the land or promoted life were described as green. Earth and fertility gods such as Geb and Osiris are depicted with green skin, indicating their power to encourage growth of vegetation. However, the ancient Egyptians recognized the cycle of growth and decay, and so green was also associated with death and the power of resurrection. So again, right here in the ancient world, we're still talking about reincarnation. This has been a fact they've talked about, that they believe exists since ancient times. Osiris was a god of the dead whose wife, Isis, magically conceived a son named Horus, and the ancient Egyptians believed that he could help them make their way to the eternal paradise, which bore a striking resemblance to their earthly lives. This wonderful place was sometimes called the Field of Malachite, or the Green Field. So green is a very important color in ancient Egypt, and you can see why now that the emerald tablets were green, and there was also a lot of green gems that were used. It's always, the ancients really like jade, Green is a powerful, powerful color. That's why they made our money green in America. They know how to use the power of the ancients against us. The ancient Egyptians were the first to write about Orion and place him into their mythologies. They associate the stars of Orion with Osiris, the sun god of rebirth and afterlife, and one of the most important gods of the ancient Egyptians. Orion was considered the abode of Osiris following his resurrection. In other words, they're saying after he passed, his spirit body went back to that star cluster. Isis dwelt on Sirius. In Egyptian mythology, Osiris was murdered and dismembered by his jealous brother, Seth, then briefly brought back to life by his sister and consort Isis. So his sister and his wife were really the same person, to father the god Horus. So let me tell you the story. So this is one of the biggest mysteries of Osiris and why he became so famous in the mysteries and everything else, and why he was kind of been revered. Now, it really begs the question: was he even a real being that just had, in terms of, I know his spirit body was real, but were his body parts real? Some of these entities, these beings, they live for tens of thousands of years. And he got into a battle with his brother, and his body was torn into pieces, like limb from limb. Arm here, arm there, leg off, this off. And all those pieces, including his manhood, was taken off as well. And then all buried in various different places, random spots. And his wife was able to track down these body parts, which is amazing to me. I mean, what type of technology do you use to track down a body part? Maybe these body parts had tracking devices in them, or were made from materials that they had the capability of scanning for. I'm not sure. Maybe they just that far advanced. But she found the body parts piece by piece, and she reassembled Osiris. Now, that's an amazing claim to make. And when I hear these types of claims in the ancient past, where some people would just brush it off as, oh, they're just making stuff up, or we don't know what they're trying to say, I think they know exactly what they're trying to say. They're trying to say that she found these body parts and put them back together, and he was a functioning human being again. She even reattached his manhood, and it worked. And then they gave birth to Horus. So that's some great technology.